All right, ready to dive into some shadowy thrills.
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. So we're going back, way back to June 1923
Oh, wow.
to explore an issue of Weird Tales magazine
Nice.
from the golden age of pulp magazines.
Oh, I love that era. So much creativity.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a stack of short stories here and even some peeks into the magazine's behind the scenes through
Interesting.
the editorial section. Should be fun.
You know, it's really interesting that you chose Weird Tales. It wasn't just another pulp magazine. It was
Right.
really one of the pioneers, like dedicated to just weird fiction,
Yeah.
which, as you know, blended horror and fantasy and even sci-fi sometimes.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And it totally captured people's imaginations back then.
And still does, which is why we're talking about it now.
Exactly. It's timeless. But
Yeah.
before we get too deep into the shadows here,
Yeah.
can you remind us what exactly weird fiction is? Like, how is it different from just a ghost story?
That's a great question. It's not just ghosts jumping out from behind doors, right?
No, it's so much more than that.
It's got to be
It
like...
goes deeper,
That's-
yeah. It's about this existential dread, you know, the
Right.
fragility of reality, the unsettling parts of human nature. So it's psychological, it's supernatural,
Yeah.
and often there's like this touch of cosmic horror too, like Lovecraft.
Okay, so a little more Lovecraftian than your average haunted house.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, and what about the pulp part of it? What does that tell us about the magazine and its audience?
Yeah, so the pulp obviously comes from the cheap paper they used back then, but it became almost a genre in itself, you know, that
Yeah.
fast-paced, kind of sensationalized storytelling.
Yeah.
It was entertainment for everybody, really,
Mhm.
and Weird Tales was perfect for that because it offered this escape
Yes.
into the strange and unusual.
Perfect. So this particular issue we're looking at today, we've got Desert Madness,
Ooh.
the Phantom Wolfhound, even the Moon Terror. When you look at these titles, it really shows how Weird Tales blended all these different genres.
Absolutely. You've got crime, you've got adventure. Like Desert Madness, this woman is falsely accused, left in the desert to die.
Wow.
Then you have The Well, which is more psychological horror, a man's guilt just manifesting in this really unsettling way.
Oh, okay.
And then The Phantom Wolfhound is totally supernatural.
Okay.
A ghost dog out for revenge.
Okay, so we have to come back to the Moon Terror.
Oh, yes.
Because you mentioned it has some early science fiction elements.
Yeah, it does.
So what makes this story stand out, and how does it fit into this whole weird fiction idea?
Well, it takes the weird, right, and throws in some cutting-edge science.
Okay.
We're talking a scientist battling evil sorcerers who are using electric impulses to destroy the Earth.
Whoa.
The story even uses things like resonance and vibration, which were big scientific topics back then.
So it's kind of like,
It is, yeah.
it's like how authors back then imagined what technology could do, good or bad.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just the technology itself. It was the way they blurred the lines between science and the supernatural. These sorcerers using electric impulses. Well, real scientists were picking up signals they thought were from Mars.
No way. Really?
Yeah, blurring the lines between fiction and reality.
Oh, wow. It makes you wonder, right, if those scientists reading this story felt like
Oh,
art was imitating life, or the other way around.
it's a crazy connection for sure.
Yeah.
But beyond the science, the Moon Terror also has that classic weird fiction theme. Humanity is vulnerable to forces we just don't understand.
Right.
You're right there with the scientists facing the unknown
Yeah.
and the potential consequences.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack just in that story alone.
For sure.
But let's zoom out for a second. When we look at all these stories, what themes keep popping up?
Well, one big one is this back and forth between justice and revenge.
Okay.
You see characters who have been wronged.
Uh-huh.
They want payback, but often through supernatural means,
Oh.
like the Phantom Wolfhound. You have a ghost dog haunting its killer, making sure justice happens even after death.
Right. And the Blade of Vengeance has something similar.
Oh, yeah.
This framed guy, he uses his freedom to get even with the people who betrayed him.
It's like the supernatural world is this cosmic court of appeals.
Yes, totally. Okay, and then there's fear, which is huge in these stories.
Oh, absolutely huge.
You've got the escape, where the main character is literally trapped by his fear of anesthesia.
Right.
Then the man the law forgot, where the fear of being forgotten, erased completely, drives the whole plot.
It really shows how powerful fear is, as strong as or stronger than any physical force.
Yes. And there's also this feeling of the unseen and unexplained, you know?
Yes. You see it everywhere.
Everywhere. Like in
Yeah.
the well, the mysterious well itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the phantom wolfhound. It's like tapping into our anxieties about what we don't know.
That classic fear of the unknown, right?
Right. The things that go bump in the night, the things we can't explain with logic.
Yeah. And Weird Tales just loves to play with that,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what's real and what's not.
So before we move on, I'm curious, what's grabbing you the most so far? What are you seeing as we dig into Weird Tales?
I think for me, it's the variety of weirdness, you know? We've seen crime, psychological horror, supernatural revenge, even a little sci-fi.
Right.
It shows how Weird Tales wasn't just one thing.
Yeah.
It was a place where authors could try new things,
Yeah.
explore the dark side of humanity.
It's fascinating.
And people are still drawn to it, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's like it's reflecting our own fears and fascinations back at us. But before we get too dark,
Okay.
let's peek into the editorial section, the eerie,
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
so we can hear the magazine's voice,
Okay.
get a glimpse into how they saw themselves.
And what's so cool about the Eerie is it's totally self-aware.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the editor actually jokes about all the cliches in the submissions.
No way.
Too many cats, too many Chinamen, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's like they're admitting it even while they embrace it.
Right, so it's humorous.
Yeah, and it shows they knew the genre's tendencies even back then.
Yeah, that's cool. But we also get to see the reader's perspective through their letters.
Oh, the letters!
It's like looking into the early days of fandom.
It really is. And the letters in this issue are amazing.
Yeah.
People are dissecting the stories, debating what they mean, even giving ideas for new stories.
That's incredible. So they were really invested.
Super invested. It's like a proto-internet forum, right?
Totally. Connecting over shared interest, contributing to the genre.
Exactly.
There's this one letter, though, that really caught my eye. A reader actually called out the editor for changing a story's ending.
No way.
They wanted to know if there was a conquering will at work, which makes me think they were pretty passionate about it.
That's amazing. It really shows the dynamic between creators and their audience.
Right.
Even back then, readers felt ownership over these stories, these worlds.
It's fascinating to see these early signs of what would become modern fandom.
Yeah.
So we've explored the stories, the themes, even the magazine's own voice.
It's been quite a dive.
But there's still so much more to discover.
Oh, definitely. We've only just begun to uncover this world of chills and thrills.
So join us as we continue exploring this June 1923 issue of Weird Tales.
It's going to be good.
We've got more stories to dissect, more themes to unravel, and even a few surprises waiting for us.
Stay tuned. It's really cool to think about how those early fans were so passionate about Weird Tales.
I know, right? Like their excitement is still echoing today.
Totally. And it shows that these stories still have power, even though they're, almost 100 years old.
Yeah. They can still make people talk, argue, feel connected.
Exactly. It's what makes going back to these old magazines so fun.
Okay, so speaking of fun discoveries,
Yeah.
let's get back to the stories. We have a few more to talk about.
We do.
Each one's a little window into the world of Weird Tales, right?
Totally, yeah. And they all play with those core ideas of weird fiction.
Okay.
You know, we talked about justice and revenge, but there's this one story. It's called Osiris. It really gets into those themes.
Okay.
It's got a cursed mummy, a dying Egyptologist, and a lawyer who gets caught up in the whole mess.
Wait, cursed mummies?
Yeah.
That's a classic horror thing.
It is, but Osiris is different from your usual mummy movie.
How so?
It plays with those fears people have about the ancient world, about waking something up that should stay buried.
I see, okay.
It's like the granddaddy of all those mummy movies.
Right.
But it's more psychological, you know, like gothic even.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just the mummy itself that's scary.
No.
It's the idea of curses.
Yeah, the curses, forbidden knowledge, all that.
That makes it even creepier, for sure.
Right. And the ending.
What about it?
Well, let's just say it reminds you. Some secrets are better left alone.
Ooh, ominous. Okay, so next up.
We have The Man the Law Forgot, which takes us into the legal world, but with a Weird Tales twist.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the twist?
So it's about this man who gets convicted, sentenced to death, but he was innocent.
Yeah.
He escapes, right.
Right.
But the catch is he's declared legally dead. He's in this legal limbo. You know, he can't get punished for anything because legally he doesn't exist.
That is mind-blowing. He's like a legal ghost.
Exactly. So what does he do? Does he lay low?
I don't know, does he?
Not really. He uses the situation to get back at the people who wronged him.
Wow.
But it's not just a simple revenge story. It really looks at what it feels like to be erased, you know?
To not exist anymore.
Yeah, forgotten by everyone. That's gotta be tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like worse than death, even.
Right, and it raises these deep questions about who we are, about justice, about existing at all, really.
I could see that.
And it all happens in the context of the Chinese community in America back then, early 1900s.
Oh, right. Remember the editor's comment about too many Chinamen?
Exactly. So this story actually deals with those stereotypes.
Okay.
It shows this complex community, people who were often pushed aside.
So it adds a whole social layer to the story.
It does. It's not just fantasy and weird stuff. It's about real struggles, too.
That's really interesting. It makes you think about what the magazine's stance was on these things.
Yeah, for sure.
Was it just reflecting what people thought back then, or maybe trying to challenge those ideas?
It's a good question. It reminds us that even entertainment can reflect the times.
And sometimes maybe even push for change.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we've got justice, revenge, even social commentary. There's one more I want to touch on before the eerie.
Okay, which one?
It's The Escape. And it seems to be about a more internal psychological horror.
Oh, yeah, The Escape. It's really intense. It's about this man completely haunted by his past, specifically his fear of anesthesia.
Anesthesia.
Yeah, he sees it as losing control, like dying but still alive. He'll do anything to avoid it.
You know, back then, anesthesia was pretty new.
Right.
A lot of people didn't understand it, were scared of it.
Totally. It must have been so unsettling.
Like surrendering to the unknown.
Exactly. And for this guy, that surrender is terrifying.
Okay.
He sees anesthesia as this door to something dark where his past can come back and get him.
So the real monster isn't outside him, it's inside his head.
Yeah, it's his own guilt, his own fear. And that makes it even more scary.
It's a battle in his mind? That's chilling.
And the story uses that battle to explore guilt, repentance, even redemption.
Wow.
It asks, can we ever outrun our past? Or are we trapped by what we've done?
That idea comes up in a lot of these stories, right?
It does. Whether it's a ghost or our own demons, the past always finds a way to catch up.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of these different weird stories.
We have.
What's sticking with you the most? What are you noticing?
I think what gets me is how, even with all the fantasy, they're still about real emotions.
Right.
Fear, guilt, anger, wanting justice. It all plays out against this background of the strange and unusual. That mix is what makes Weird Tales so good, even now.
Yeah, totally. It's universal, you know? It speaks to everyone, even while taking us to worlds of mummies and ghost dogs.
I agree. Okay, so, ready to shift gears a bit.
Sure, let's do it. What do you have in mind?
How about we look at the magazine itself? You know, we get a peek behind the curtain with the eerie, the editorial section.
Oh, yeah, the eerie. I'm curious about that.
It's so cool because you really hear the editor's voice.
Okay.
Their thoughts on the genre, on the readers, even their frustrations.
Right, like the whole too many cats thing. It's funny that even back then, editors had their pet peeves.
I know, right? What else did you notice in the eerie?
Well, I notice how self-aware the editor is.
Yeah.
They poke fun at the cliches, but they also celebrate what makes the genre special.
They do.
They talk directly to the readers, answer their letters, even ask for ideas for future stories.
It feels like a real back and forth.
Yeah, conversation.
Between the magazine and the fans, a sense of community.
Exactly. Which is why the eerie is more than just editorials.
I agree.
It shows how Weird Tales brought people together, created a space for them.
Those early fan communities we were talking about, the ones that led to today's fandoms.
Right. Okay, I think it's time we move on to the last part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. We still have a lot to uncover.
Welcome back. We've been on quite the journey with Weird Tales, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. From ghost dogs to ancient curses.
It's amazing how much these stories from 1923 still grab you.
I know. And just before the break, we were talking about the eerie, that behind-the-scenes section.
Yeah, it's so interesting how much personality comes through.
I really get a feel for the editor.
Totally. Like, they're a real person with opinions and quirks, not just some nameless editor.
Right. And they were really shaping the whole genre of weird fiction. You know, it's funny.
What is...
Remember how the editor kind of joked about all the cliches and the submissions? Too many cats, too many Chinamen.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, even back then, editors had their pet peeves.
I know, right? But it's interesting because there's a story in this issue that directly deals with one of those tropes.
Wait, really? Which one?
The man the law forgot. The story with the Chinese character.
Oh, yeah. You're right. It's almost like this story is saying, hey, there's more to these characters than just a cliche.
Exactly. Makes you wonder if the editor chose that story on purpose.
Yeah, to kind of challenge those
To
stereotypes.
show there's depth there, complexity.
So it's more than just a legal thriller with a supernatural twist.
It is.
It's about identity, about feeling like you belong, about being seen when society wants to ignore you.
Powerful stuff. And it just shows you the power of storytelling, you know?
To change our minds, make us see things differently.
Exactly. Speaking of seeing things differently,
Yeah.
remember that question we asked earlier about what weird tales would look like today?
Oh, yeah, good point. What anxieties would it tap into?
Yeah.
What would fascinate people now?
Right. What would those stories be about? I bet we'd see a lot about technology,
Yeah, for sure.
about climate change, about how divided everyone is. It'd be fascinating to see how weird fiction would handle that.
Totally. I mean, the genre has always been about those blurry lines between reality, right?
Yeah.
And about the darkness inside people.
So today's anxieties, they'd fit right in. Imagine stories about AI becoming self-aware,
Ooh, scary.
about virtual reality being so real you can't tell the difference,
Whoa.
about social media trapping people in their own little bubbles.
That's a scary thought.
But that's what makes it so interesting. And I bet, just like back in 1923,
Yeah.
people would be arguing about these stories, picking them apart, finding personal meaning in them.
Because that's what good stories do.
They
Reba.
do. They make you think, they make you question, they show you new ways to see the world.
Well said. You know, I think that brings us to the end of our Weird Tales deep dive.
Wow, time flies when you're in the world of the weird.
It really does. We've covered so much, from cursed mummies to anxieties about the future.
It's been a blast.
I agree. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the strange and unusual.
Anytime.
And to everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed it. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep finding those stories that make you think. Until next time, happy reading.